Hello, my geniuses. Welcome to another physio lecture series. Today is a great science to Lorenzo, and today we're talking about the arterial blood pressure. So naturally, you can call it the blood pressure, but it's always called the arterial blood pressure because here is the pressure that is affected when the blood is moving through the arteries. So that's why they call it the arterial blood pressure, or you can just call it for short the blood pressure. So if you are new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on your post notification button so that anytime I drop any video, you'll be sure to be notified. If you want me to make any video for you, make sure you drop it down in the comment section. I promise I'll make that video for you when I say it. And always stay to the ending of this video because I'll be giving you useful tips that you'll be using for your exams. Are you getting me now? So let us jump right into the video. So first of all, little by little, we want to talk about the arterial blood pressure, and I'll explain it to the best of my ability so that you understand. So first of all, what is the introduction to the arterial blood pressure? So arterial, which means artery, blood pressure. So arterial blood pressure is defined as the lateral pressure that is felt in the lateral wall of the arteries, or the pressure that is felt in the lateral wall of the arteries. You call it the arterial blood pressure. You can call it the lateral pressure felt in the wall of the arteries, or the pressure felt in the lateral wall of the arteries. Anyone is here. Arterial blood pressure. So when blood is being pumped away from the heart, moving through the vessels, the way it is moving, the pressure felt in the wall is called the arterial blood. If it's in the arteries, you call it the arterial blood pressure. If it's the vein, you call it the venous pressure. But in this case, usually the venous pressure is much more lower, so it is not that fixed. I get it now. But the one that is very strong is the arterial blood pressure, and that is when the left ventricle releases cardiac output to the aortas and down to the arteries. So the pressure that is felt in all these lateral walls are called the arterial blood pressure. So I say you can otherwise call it blood pressure. So the blood pressure is just like a pipe. Now when water is flowing through a pipe, as water is flowing to a pipe, the pressure at which the water is using to go out. So sometimes when the water is flowing slowly, you can say the pressure of this water is very low. So the pressure felt in the lateral wall, the tunica intima, the wall of the vessel, the pressure felt in that wall is called arterial blood pressure. So very important, or you can call it blood pressure. So very simple. So now in the normal values of the blood pressure, you can get what we call the systolic blood pressure. Are you getting me now? This is the pressure felt during systole. So the systolic blood pressure is the pressure felt during systole. And what type of systole? We have called the ventricular systole. The ventricular systole is when the ventricle is contracting, pumping blood during the ejection phase. So when the blood, the end diastolic volume enters into the ventricle and pushes the blood through the aorta, we call it the systole. Are you getting me now? So we call that systole. When blood moves from the ventricle out of the aorta to the rest of the body, we call it systole. And the process whereby blood flows from the ventricle out is called the ejection phase. So the ejection phase is the phase at which blood leaves the ventricle to the rest of the body, and before it to go to the rest of the body, it must pass through the big artery called the aorta. Are you getting now? So when it's passing through the aorta, what happens is now supplies to the medium artery called the arteries, and the smaller arteries called the atrials. So the big artery is called the aorta, the smaller medium arteries are called the normal arteries we know, while the smaller arteries are called the atrials. So during systole is pumping when the heart is contracting to push blood. Diastole is when the heart is relaxing. So the blood pressure felt when the heart contracts to push blood is called ventricular systole, and the pressure is called the end diastolic. The pressure is called the systolic blood pressure. So the systolic blood pressure is the pressure felt during when the ventricle is on systole. Are you getting it? And it is about 120 mmHg that we know, which is between 110 to about 130 mmHg. So when the ventricle contracts to push blood away from the aorta, the pressure that is felt in the ventricle after preload is called the systolic blood pressure, which is 120 mmHg. The diastolic blood pressure is the pressure felt during diastole. So during ventricular diastole, the heart is relaxing to receive blood from the atrium. So the atrium at that particular point is in systole, but remember it coincides with the last ventricular filling. Are you getting it? The last rapid filling, the last filling. So because at that point in time, when blood is rushing from the atrium to the ventricle, it doesn't need contraction. All it just needs is for the valve to open and the blood enters into the ventricle fast. So the ventricular diastole is when the ventricle is wide open receiving blood, and at this particular point here, the pressure needed for the ventricle to expand is called the ventricular or diastole, which is the pressure needed for it to expand to receive blood. Are you getting me now? So and it's about 60 to 80, about 80 mmHg. So average, you have 120 over 80. So when you hear 120 systolic blood pressure, that is the pressure needed to contract and the ventricle isometrically to release blood. Are you getting me now? Why the pressure needed to for blood to enter into the ventricle, for it to expand, that pressure needed for it to expand to receive blood is called the diastolic blood pressure. So when you minus the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure, you get the pulse pressure. So the pulse pressure is the difference between the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. So don't confuse it from stroke volume. Stroke volume is the difference between the diastolic blood volume and the systolic blood volume, so it's different. Stroke volume is when you minus the diastolic blood volume 150 ml and the systolic blood volume. While pulse pressure is when you minus the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. So when we have 120 mmHg and when we have 80 mmHg, when you minus it, you get 40 mmHg. Now, don't forget systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, pulse pressure. And the mean arterial blood pressure is very simple. In the mean arterial blood pressure, are you getting now? This is the diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. So which means the mean arterial blood pressure is dependent on the diastolic blood pressure. So it is the diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. So you can see this formula. So when you increase the diastolic blood pressure, you have increased the MAP. And the MAP is very important. But when you increase the systolic blood pressure, you have increased the pulse pressure. Increase the systolic blood pressure, you increase the pulse pressure. Increase the diastolic blood pressure, you increase the MAP, which is the mean arterial blood pressure. So everybody is different. Increase the diastolic, increase MAP. Increase systolic, increase pulse pressure. So if the diastolic blood pressure is 80 plus 1/3 times pulse pressure, what is the pulse pressure? The difference between systolic and diastolic, which is 40. Then I get 1/3 times 40, that is 40 divided by 3, that is 13.3. 80 plus 13.3, I get 93.3 mmHg. So 93 is the mmHg. So 93 mmHg is the MAP, which is the mean arterial blood pressure, but it can be vary between 90 to 99 mmHg. So again, increase the diastolic blood pressure, increase MAP. Increase systolic blood pressure, increase pulse pressure. Are you getting now? So remember, in the arterial system, we have the large arteries, which is the aorta. We have the moderate arteries, which is our normal arteries we know, and we have small arteries. So here we have big arteries, aorta. We have the large arteries with moderate pressure. We have small arteries with smaller pressure, and the atrials with lower pressure. So the pressure felt from the larger vessels to the smaller vessels is called the arterial blood pressure. So hope you understood what I said. From the introduction, the pressure that is felt in the lateral wall of the arteries, or the lateral pressure felt in the wall of the artery, is called arterial blood pressure. We talked about some parameters, which is systolic blood pressure, when the heart contracts and push blood away. Are you getting now? Then we have diastolic blood pressure, when the heart is relaxing to release blood and stretching. That pressure that is felt is called diastolic blood pressure. Pulse pressure is when you minus both of them. And mean arterial blood pressure is the diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. So what are the variations now? We have what we call physiological variations. So what are the physiological variations? Like the one we did in cardiac output. So open your ear wide open while we connect. So the age, like I said, cardiac output increases with age, same as blood pressure. So blood pressure increases with age. Are you getting now? So from a child to an old age, what happens? Blood pressure rises. Why? Because there's loss of elasticity. Because there's loss of elasticity of the blood vessel. Because naturally the blood vessel have elastic fibers that helps in recoiling. But now, when you a child to an old person has a much more decreased elasticity of the blood pressure. So which means the blood pressure cannot increase in size. because when there's pressure, what happens? The diameter of the vessel tend to increase inside due to the elastic fibers. But in old people, there's loss of elasticity there. When you start approaching old age, what happens? Which decreases the size. Even though when there's high amount of pressure, the vessels cannot open up, which causes what? Increase in blood pressure. So increase in blood pressure increases with age. In gender, always is slightly higher in male. Well, very well, because male have increase in blood, increase in peripheral resistance, increase in activities. That's why they are more in male than in female. Temperature, remember, when you increase temperature, what do you increase? You increase the heat across the vessels, vasodilating the vessels. So I told you that increase in temperature increases venous return. Increase in temperature increases venous return, increases heart rate, increases stroke volume, increases cardiac output. But when you are vasodilating the blood vessel, what happens? You are dropping the blood pressure. So temperature is inversely proportional to arterial blood pressure. So when you increase temperature, like in the afternoon, now when there's heat, or when you just eat finish, what happens? Same thing. When heat is distributed throughout the vessel, what happens? It causes the blood vessel to vasodilate. And when you vasodilate the blood vessel, you drop the blood pressure, but you increase the cardiac output. So temperature favors cardiac output and heart rate, but inversely proportional to blood pressure. Body build. And now larger people have increased blood pressure. Why do they have larger people increase blood pressure? Why? Because their vessels are what? Narrow. One, for you to have that, all those kind of stuff, well, there will be increase in metabolites. Take for instance, in people with obesity, what happens? There's increase in sugar, increase in metabolite in their blood, and when there's increase in metabolite in the blood, you're increasing the blood pressure. So people with body build, they have increase in cardiac output, and they also have increase in blood pressure. Exercise increasing blood pressure. Why? Because when doing exercise, what happens? Your body does what? Releases cortisol and catecholamine. So noepi, which is a part of catecholamine, we bind to the receptor on the blood vessel. Again, when you are having exercise, the body releases what we call catecholamine, especially norepinephrine. So norepinephrine binds to the receptor on the blood vessel, usually the alpha 1 receptor. It binds to alpha 1 receptor. When it binds to alpha 1 receptor, it vasoconstricts the blood vessel. When it vasoconstricts the blood vessel, there will be increase in blood pressure. So after meal too, when you eat finish, like I said in cardiac output, when you just eat finish now, there's absorption from your intestine into the blood. So when there's absorption in the intestine into the blood due to high amounts, so the way you eat one plate of food, that's how all those food will get into the blood. When they get into the blood, they will have to do what? There will be increase in metabolite in the blood. So that increase in metabolite, due to restriction of the blood movement due to high solute, there will be increase in blood pressure. So remember, blood pressure strives anytime there's peripheral resistance. And how there's peripheral resistance, there's increase in metabolite here. Metabolite in the sense increase in nutrients. Before, the blood was just fluid normally, but now there's increase in solute. Why? Because you just finished eating. So increase in solute caused by nutrient, increase in blood pressure. Now early in the morning, what happens? The blood pressure is more reduced. Why? Because it's much more reduced in early hours of the morning, but in the afternoon and evening it tends to be higher. Are you getting now? Why? Because there is activities, and anytime there's activities, there's cortisol and catecholamine release. And what does cortisol do? It increases blood pressure through the help of norepinephrine and epinephrine, which contract the heart. So hope you understand now. Based on the variation we have in age, it increases with age from a child to an old man. Then gender, it's more higher in male than in female. Temperature, there's decrease in blood pressure when you increase temperature. Why? Because there will be heat distribution throughout the blood vessel, vasodilating it. Body build, the more the body builds, the increase in blood pressure. Exercise increases body blood pressure due to increase in norepinephrine. When you feed, what happens? There's increase in metabolite in the blood, which increases blood pressure, and blood pressure is much more high in the afternoon and in the evening due to increase in activities. Factors affecting blood pressure. So the factors affecting blood pressure, we have two factors. You have the central factors and you have the peripheral factors. You have the central factors and the peripheral factors. Central factors are factors that are related to the heart, while peripheral factors are related to the blood vessel. So we're looking at the central factors. and the peripheral factors and their contribution in what? Blood pressure regulation. Same as we said for cardiac output. For cardiac output, we have the venous return, we have the heart rate, we have the peripheral resistance, and we have some other component that help to increase what? Cardiac output. But for this one, we split it into central factors and peripheral factors. We'll be taking it small. So all these things are connected. See it as a connection. Don't see it as a walk. See it as a connection. I'm helping you to connect it. The pressure felt in the lateral wall of the vessel is called arterial blood pressure, and it is dependent on the systolic blood pressure, which is when the heart contracts, it pushes blood. When the heart is relaxing to receive blood, there's also a pressure. So you are contracting, you are releasing blood 120 mmHg. You are relaxing, you are receiving blood 80 mmHg. When you minus them, you get pulse. Are you getting now? And when you are getting your mean arterial blood pressure, it is not the arithmetic mean of systolic and diastolic. It's just the diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the plus pressure. So when you increase diastolic blood pressure, you have increased what? Your map. Are you getting now? And it is, I give you all the physiological factors. Now in the factors, now you have central factors, which is the cardiac output. So how does cardiac output increase arterial blood pressure? Remember, the cardiac output is directly proportional to arterial blood pressure. Why? Again, during systole, what happens? The heart contracts due to epinephrine release. The heart contracts, and when the heart contracts, first of all, it increases heart rate, stroke volume, and cardiac output. So when you increase cardiac output, what happens? As blood is moving faster, you will not increase blood pressure. So which means the cardiac output has to be high enough in order to what? Increase blood pressure. Naturally, cardiac output do not increase blood pressure. But during ventricular systole, when blood is being pumped out from the heart, what happens? The ventricular pressure, as the pressure the ventricle is using to contract to release our blood, that pressure it needs, we call it the systolic blood pressure. So that systolic blood pressure is the arterial blood pressure. So when that systolic blood pressure increases, it increases the pushing out blood throughout the body. Are you getting me now? So but one thing, for you to increase pressure in the vessels, you have to increase the cardiac output a lot to increase that pressure in the peripheral vessels. But centrally, when you increase the cardiac output, for you to increase cardiac output rather, the pressure needed to undergo ventricular systole, so the pressure needed for the heart to contract, are you getting now, has to be high in order to increase cardiac output. So it must be 120 mmHg, at least 120, 130. The pressure has to be high, because when you drop the ventricular pressure, what happens? The cardiac output will reduce, because why? The pressure that is needed for the ventricle to contract will be low. So the ventricular pressure is occurs when there's increase in ventricular contraction. So ventricular contraction high, cardiac output high, arterial blood pressure high. Get it now? Don't forget. Heart rate. Now heart rate now is directly proportional to what? Arterial blood pressure. How is it directly proportional? When you increase the heart rate, which is the SA node sending at which is the conducting fiber sending action potential to the contractile fibers. So when they are sending action potential to the contractile fiber, what happens? It ignites the increase of stroke volume. So the stroke volume is dependent on the force of contraction. So when the heart is contracting enough, what happens? That increases the pressure. So it increases the pressure centrally in the heart, and that central pressure increases cardiac output. So which means heart rate is directly proportional to the cardiac output, which is directly proportional to the arterial blood pressure. Since arterial blood pressure is directly proportional to what? Since cardiac output is directly proportional to arterial blood pressure, which means increase in heart rate will increase stroke volume, we increase cardiac output, we also increase arterial blood pressure. But a mid change in heart rate do not affect the blood pressure. Only when the heart rate is high, it will affect the arterial blood pressure. So what are the peripheral factors? These are factors that are not located in the heart, they're located in the blood vessel. First of all, diameter. Remember, what increases blood pressure? Peripheral resistance. So when you increase peripheral resistance, what is peripheral resistance? The distance offered by the vessel. So when you reduce the size of a pipe, or when you reduce the size of your blood vessel, which is a pipe, what happens? The pressure will increase, because it will take more force and it take more pressure needed to push away from that vessel, because the vessel is tiny. A wider vessel or a wider pipe do need less pressure, because the fluid will just flow freely. But if you reduce the size of the vessel, you need more pressure to push it. So which means diameter. So diameter here is inversely proportional to the arterial blood pressure. Why? Because when you increase diameter, what happens? You have dropped the blood pressure. Why? Because just like widening, increasing the size of a pipe, increase the size of the pipe, you don't need pressure to put fluid. Fluid will go freely, water will go freely. Same as the blood vessel. When you increase the size of the blood vessel, what happens? You drop the blood pressure because there's no more pressure needed to push fluid throughout to the rest of part of the body, especially the brain. The blood vessel going to the brain is upwards, so which means you need more pressure to push blood upwards because of gravity is pulling it down. Okay, now so take for instance there is an increase and vasodilation of the blood vessel in the brain, which means blood will not be able to move upwards. So which means increase the diameter is inversely proportional to the blood pressure. Why? Increase in diameter of the vessel drops the blood pressure. So larger diameter, lower resistance. Smaller diameter, higher resistance. Don't forget. Viscosity. What is the meaning of viscosity? The internal friction offered by a what fluid. Why? Now take for instance, you are taking tea. Are you getting now? You put a milk there, a lot of milk, a lot of beverage inside the tea. What happens? Will there be pressure? Like will there be a resistance of when you are turning it? It's different when you have ordinary water and you are stirring the water. When you stir the water without any condiment or any beverage inside, it tends to move freely. But when you now add so many things inside and you are not turning, you tend to feel pressure there, which tells you that the internal friction offered by a fluid is called viscosity. So when you increase solute in the blood, increase solute like red blood cell, white blood cell nutrients, if these things are high, blood move with higher resistance, which means you need more pressure. So increase in viscosity, increase peripheral resistance, which increase blood pressure, which means viscosity is directly proportional to the blood pressure. Are you getting that? So when you increase viscosity, you have increased blood pressure. When you increase diameter, you have dropped the blood pressure because there's no more peripheral resistance. The peripheral resistance is abolished, it's already widened. So only when you have a smaller diameter, you have an arterial blood pressure. Blood volume. So blood volume also directly proportional to blood pressure. Why? Because when you increase the blood volume, when you increase the cardiac output, when you increase the heart rate, you increase the stroke volume, you increase the blood volume. And when you increase the blood volume enormously, you increase blood pressure. So blood volume is the increase in the fluid in the blood. So when the blood volume is about 5 liters or more, what happens? There's one reason. You have increased cardiac output, which means the heart is pumping out blood to reach the tissues. And if the heart is pumping out blood to reach the tissue, which means as you increase cardiac output, you reach the arterial blood pressure. Velocity of blood. Are you getting now? So velocity of blood is directly proportional. So when the velocity of blood flow is moving fast, the velocity is high. Are you getting now? So if the velocity is high, which means the pressure that will be feeling in the lateral wall of the vessel will also be high. So velocity is directly proportional to arterial blood pressure, because an increase in velocity is telling you that the displacement to which the blood will be moving inside the wall of the artery will be high. And when it is high, the arterial blood pressure too is high, because if you are recording the pressure felt in the arteries, you to be high because the blood is moving too fast. So velocity is directly proportional to arterial blood pressure. Venous return. When you are mobile, you are walking up and down, or you are increasing respiration, what happens? Remember in respiration I said you are constricting the IVC. When you take a deep breath, there will be increase in intra-abdominal pressure. Increase in intra-abdominal pressure constricts, I get him now, the IVC on the diaphragm in the aponeurotic layer. So when the IVC is contracted a little, not constricted, contracted a little, what happens? There will be increase in venous return. So what have you just done? You have increased venous pressure. You increase venous pressure when you increase intra-abdominal pressure to contract the blood and push it upwards. Same as pumping. The muscle pump too, when doing mobility, what happens? The muscle creates a constricting force on the IVC to push them upwards. So increase in venous return is equal to increase in venous pressure. Increase in venous pressure, increase in venous return, increase in arterial blood pressure. Peripheral resistance is also directly proportional, we already know. Reduce the size of the blood vessel, you increase blood pressure. Elasticity. Are you getting me now? Elasticity is inversely proportional to arterial blood pressure. More elastic vessel easily expand. Are you getting me now? More elastic vessel easily expand. So that is why I tell you that in younger people, due to elasticity of the blood vessel, because of one thing you have to know, that the intima, are you getting now, and the adventitia has elastic fibers. There's elastic fibers in the intima and the adventitia, and sometimes in the media and the adventitia there's elastic fibers there. Are you getting now? Since there's elastic fibers, when blood is moving at high pressure, what will the elastic fiber do? They will increase in size, and when they increase in size, the blood pressure will drop. That is why the body regulates blood pressure in that manner, to increase or decrease the elastic fibers in the what? Arteries. Are you getting me? So, but in old people, I told you that due to a loss in elasticity of their arteries, what happens? Even though when blood is moving too fast, their vessel wall cannot dilate. Are you getting me? To drop the blood pressures. Therefore, there'll be increase in blood pressure. That's why there are much more hypertension more in old people. Why? Because of loss of elasticity of the lungs, number one, and also the heart. Okay, now, so hope you are understanding all this, my gist, everything I'm giving you. Are you getting me? So it's very, very important to know. Now, to summarize all these things we have talked about in this video, because like I said, I'll be splitting the video into two. The next video, I'll be talking about the regulation of arterial blood pressure, because it is much more clinically important for you to understand how to regulate the arterial blood pressure. So to round off this topic now, we'll be talking about, in summary, the arterial blood pressure is the pressure felt in the lateral wall of the arteries, or the lateral pressure felt in the wall of the arteries. That is the arterial blood pressure. Now, the systolic blood pressure is the pressure felt during when the ventricle is on systole, and it is 120 mmHg. Are you getting? Why the diastolic blood pressure is felt when the heart is relaxing, which is 80 mmHg. The pulse pressure is the difference between 120 and 80, which is systolic minus diastolic. Are you getting me? Why MAP is the diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the blood pulse pressure. And again, I told you that it varies with age, gender, temperature, body build, exercise, after meal, and diurnal variation. And the regulation, we have central regulation, which is the cardiac output and heart rate, and we have the peripheral regulation, which is the blood vessel diameter, which is the viscosity, which is the blood volume, and so on. So we have made sense with everything we have talked about to introduce arterial blood pressure. So it will be very, very important in your clinicals for you to understand this. So if you are still here with me, make sure to subscribe and follow me to my next video, where I'll be talking about the regulation of arterial blood pressure. See you in my next video. Bye bye.